What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Olav of the almighty Bokassa. Thank you so much for coming here, man. It's great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here with this new album, All Out of Dreams. So was there sort of like a vision that you had in mind? Was there sort of like a preconceived goal that you had in a way? Or was this a very like experimental and like very like throwing at the paint at the wall and seeing what sticks sort of songwriting process?
In some ways, it's kind of like a departure. Not that we ever made a concept album, but the first three of them, they start with like an instrumental intro song, and they end with Immortal Space Pirate parts 1, 2, and 3. And for this album, we were just like, yeah, let's move a bit away from that kind of recipe formula and start the album with like a straight in your face song.
Well, I was one of the first things I noticed actually, because with the first couple of records you did have that sort of introduction. Is it fair to say that maybe this album was maybe a little bit more liberating, if you will?
Yeah, in some ways, I suppose, because they weren't like concept albums, but it was like a way of bookending the sequence of the songs with like an instrumental intro and then a long, I guess, as proggy as we can go, longer song at the end. So, but then again, this album does have a kind of long last song as well, though. But it isn't like it's not fitting with the other three, which are kind of like a trilogy of songs.
Because I've always thought that like with the rawness of your sound, with how old school it sounds, but you have like this sort of hardcore punk aspect behind it. I always found it unique on with the many different experimental elements you brought in there. It's fair to say that in Bokassa there's many different inspirations, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. We don't what's the word you could use? We don't exclude anything, I suppose. So we've always been open to like mixing different genres and just seeing what kind of fits and not like limiting ourselves, like saying, this isn't this or that, or this isn't stoner or whatever. It's like, if it appeals to us, then that's kind of the quality check, I guess.
Yeah. I've always wondered what it means when something is called stoner rock, because like I've gotten stoned listening to Baroness and Sleep and High on Fire, but I've also excuse me, I've also gotten stoned listening to like Mariah Carey. So like what makes something stoner in a way? Is it just in the riffs, or?
Well, it's kind of the slowness and heaviness of it, in my head at least, that it's kind of like it's in the riffs mainly, but there's I guess you call it stoner rock from it, stoners being kind of slow and unresponsive, maybe.
Yeah, because I've seen plenty of stoners at like hardcore shows where the songs are like a minute and a half long and the pits are going insane. So
yeah,
I just always wondered, like, I think anything could be stoner music. It just depends on what your taste is at when you're stoned, right?
Yeah, and we've never like we called ourselves stoner punk just because we play fast and heavy music, but at the same time we could sprinkle in like a slow and heavy riff in there,
And having the ability to go very fast and very slow at times, does that almost feel like you channel a different energy into that music? Does it almost feel like you express a different side of yourself in that? Or being that it's still Bokassa in the end, it feels very much the same?
I think at the end of the song or at the end of the day, it's still like a Bokassa song. Doesn't matter if it's kind of fast or slow. And it is liberating to be able to do both, I suppose. So I guess since we're like fans of so many different kinds of music, we felt that we didn't have to like limit ourselves to either being fast or slow, and could go from being both in the same song as well. So,
well, being the drummer of Bokassa, did you always need music before you laid down your parts and knowing what rhythm needs to come in, knowing how the rhythm is going to be, or have you ever had a whole drum pattern written and then maybe the rest of the band would write around that?
Usually it's like our singer and guitarist Jörn is the one who writes like mainly. He's probably written like 97% of all the music, and when he's writing the riffs he usually has like a kind of like a drum pattern in his head. So usually I get like a rough blueprint, but I'm able to like fill in the blanks with like fills and based on patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, not to talk shit, but when somebody hands you the music and you haven't put the drums on it yet, how off time and off rhythm is it sometimes?
Well, I mean, he has used GarageBand for ages.
Oh, I haven't heard that in a long time. I kept hearing Pro Tools and Cubase and all that stuff, so I haven't heard
No, because
GarageBand.
I don't know. He's not like that big into using like studio stuff. So he's just like get like a rough mix together. And in GarageBand, you have this thing called virtual drummers, and then you have like this square where you can like pull if you want the drummer to have more fills or more straight and stuff like that. So and they have like different names as well. So I think Kyle is like the virtual drummer we've used a lot. So it's only just to get an idea, and then when in the rehearsal room, we can just like do it more specifically and stuff.
Yeah. Who would have thought that GarageBand means that you're old school now at this point? Like back before,
Yeah.
like they were saying, I'm old school, I only use analog. But now, like people are gonna be like, I'm old school, I only use GarageBand.
Yeah.
You kids with your Pro Tools.
Yeah, I think it actually has moved on to Logic now, which is the next step. But at least the majority of our records are pre-produced in GarageBand. So
Yeah. Well,
there's that.
when everybody's making records from AI and stuff like that, that's when you guys
Yeah.
will move on to Pro Tools.
Yeah, so always a step behind, I guess. The rest.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You may be a step behind in your process, but you'll always be a step ahead with your sound. I think.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good quote to use, actually.
Yeah. Feel free to take it.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah. But when it came to, I know you said that like Crimson Riders and Molotov Rocktail aren't like concepts or Divide and Conquer. They kind of have like their bookended sort of means behind it.
Yeah.
So did the making of All Out Dreams almost feel like a completely different, like almost like a new beginning in a way? It didn't feel like you were just making a continuation of Molotov Rocktail, right?
Well, yeah, in some ways, I guess, because we this is the first time we went to like a residential studio.
Oh, okay.
So we went to Denmark in the countryside there. During the summer, we had like a couple of weeks off between festivals. So we like went there and worked with this awesome producer and engineer. He didn't produce the record, but he owns the studio called Tue Madsen, who has like worked with like Meshuggah and tons of other stuff, Soilwork, Sick of It All. Lots of cool bands, and he's a really cool dude as well. So he has this like studio out on a farm in the countryside of Denmark. So in some ways, it was like a departure in that we were kind of relaxed and more supportive of each other instead of having to stress in the studio. But I think the songs as well. I mean, it's our most technical album to date. And yeah, I guess it was the first time we because we felt the pressure of kind of, we can't go to Denmark and not kind of be as prepared as we can be.
Yeah.
So
I've noticed that when a band goes to a studio somewhere where they're not like doing it out of their home and they're not doing it DIY or something like that. I mean, it's cool when a band does it DIY, but
Of course.
I feel like when they have to go to a studio somewhere, like outside of their home or whatever, it almost kind of lights a fire under their ass in a way where like there's no time to be wasted. I feel like maybe when you're doing it DIY, there's almost a little too much freedom. I've noticed that the records that take the longest are the records that are usually DIY.
yeah, because I mean, you can always, if you're recording it at home or close to home, you can always go and fix anything. But doing it like we did, it's like, yeah, when we leave, then we're kind of done. I mean, if we're gonna go and fix anything, it's gonna take a lot of time and money and effort. So it's like they used to do back in the day, I guess. Like when you read about like Deep Purple or old bands, just like keeping the imperfections in there because there was too much of a hassle to fix it.
Yeah.
And yeah, makes it a bit more real, I suppose.
Absolutely. I think that's like, I've noticed that every time a band does go to a studio for the first time, that it is almost like a turning point in a way for them.
Yeah. I mean, not to say that we haven't used studios before, but this time it was a bit more like remote and kind of not being in a town where we live makes it a bit more this is like the whole thing that matters, kind of thing.
Did that almost feel like also being in a completely different atmosphere maybe provided different inspiration that you didn't have before?
I don't know, because I mean all the songs were kind of 100% done, so it's not like we added some new stuff. I mean, I did play the spoons on the track, but that didn't make the album, unfortunately.
Future deep cut, future B-side.
Yeah. No, but I guess it was just like, we worked from, I don't know, 10 till 6 o'clock in the evening. And then we just barbecued and, just palled around, I guess, in the Danish countryside, which was very beautiful and relaxing.
It being the drummer of a band, I like to have this sort of conversation because I've heard a lot of people, and it's no coincidence that they are not drummers when they say this, but a lot of people have said that because drums aren't very melodic driven, that it's not a very emotional instrument and it's just strictly technical in a way. But when I listen to the rawness of Bokassa, I see that there's a lot of emotional energy challenged into your instrument. And being that you also contribute vocally into Bokassa as well, delivery backups, I'd imagine that there's a lot of emotional elements that are incorporated into your instrument, right?
I would say so. I mean, I'm not the most technical drummer, but I like to think that I play with a certain passion. And the way, I mean, there is a lot to be said about the way you kind of hit a drum or a guitar for that matter, like how you kind of strike the instrument is where you're allowed to kind of express your own, identity. So I guess even though I'm just playing kind of basic grooves, I like to think that it wouldn't sound the same if another guy came in and played it.
Yeah. And I've interviewed hundreds of drummers at this point. Like, I've interviewed Justin from Killswitch Engage, and then I interviewed, a Gene Hoglan. And the way that they described that their process was completely different. Like, it was almost night and day, and almost sounded like they were talking about a different instrument altogether.
Yeah. It's such a primitive instrument as well. I mean, I mean, you could say objectively that it's the most basic instrument because it's acoustic and, I mean, a guitar, you need like a piece of wood and you need strings and they have to be tuned to a certain thing. But a drum is like so basic and so primitive. So I guess kind of the personality of the player comes out kind of in a other way.
Yeah, definitely. But what I've noticed with guitars, like some people buy an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar or something, and it feels a completely different purpose. But I feel like whether you're playing grindcore or you're playing, country music, drums always serve the same universal purpose. And I've seen, like, off the top of my head, I've seen Tama drums be used for all different types of genres. But I've only seen, I don't see country musicians using an ESP or a Dean guitar. You know what I mean?
That's good. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it just seems like drums are the most universal instrument because regardless of what you're playing, if your drummer sucks, your band is going to suck.
Yeah, I mean that's 100% true. And even though you're playing the same thing, I mean, you can hear it on like AC/DC tracks when they change out Phil Rudd or Chris Slade, for example.
Yeah.
The kind of the feel and the groove and the kind of passion is kind of gone, even though Chris Slade is hitting the drums hard and fast and has a huge kit with huge bass drums he can hit with his hands. Yeah. It's just that the feel isn't there anymore, at least in my ears. So, I mean, it is like a personal thing, and it's very interesting. I mean, you could philosophize about it for days, I suppose, yeah.
Well, one of my favorite bands when I was in high school was All That Remains, and I remember seeing their now former drummer, Jason Costa. He was still doing it with like a jazz technique in a way, and that just always surprised me to see somebody playing jazz techniques in a fucking metalcore band.
It's cool, though. That I mean, everybody has their own kind of approach to it. So
yeah, definitely. But I do want to ask you this, circling back to the Metallica tour in 2019, because your music is very punk rock and very raw and whatnot. Yeah. So like when I listen to Bokassa, I'm just picturing, in a dive bar and, like this really intimate setting and, very dirty, raw CBGB's like setting. But with Metallica, you're playing freaking stadiums. Does the sound radiate differently or does it feel like a completely different type of show depending on the setting and atmosphere that you're in?
Well, if I can get like technical about it, talking about equipment and stuff, we were forced to use those in-air monitors.
Okay.
Because the stage is so huge, and they had like there's like catwalk that went into the crowd and everything. So we were forced to use these like wireless in-ear monitors and wireless systems on the guitar and bass, which we had never done before that. We've always used like those huge monitors on stage that just blast music up at you instead. So that was like a technical thing we had to get used to. But apart from that, I mean, it was just like one guitarist, one bassist, and a drummer.
Wow.
And our sound guy just had to make it sound huge. And what it did was just 2 microphones on the guitar and pan them. So it kind of sounds like it's 2 guitars, but it's just the same. We didn't use any tracks or anything. So, I mean, he got so many compliments during that tour, our sound front of house engineer.
Yeah.
Because people said we sounded like huge for just being 3 people on stage.
I've always wondered how a trio band. I think, look, I love Metallica and I love all the metal bands that may have, 2 guitar players and all that. But if you can radiate across an entire stadium with just 3 people, that's just talent within itself. Like, there's really nothing to mask behind. Even though you had like those different equipment and stuff to help you, like. I saw Blink-182 last year at the Garden, and it still astonished me how one guitar player can make the riffs radiate so much. And
then again, it comes down to how you like play, right? If you mean it and if you have passion when you're doing it, that's gonna translate through the amplifiers and the speakers and to the crowd eventually.
Absolutely. Do you almost have to practice crowd interaction or stage presence, even though you're behind the kit in what you do? I'd imagine that there's still an essence of stage presence and some type of crowd interaction that you have to sort of master as well, right?
I guess I'm much better at it when I've kind of had a few beers beforehand, because at our shows, I mean, we try to just have as much fun as possible, also with the crowd. So we love it when like crowds start heckling, or not heckling, but like shout out stuff, and we can like interact with them back and forth, and maybe it turns into something funny.
Yeah.
And our singer is like, he's a professional radio DJ, so he's got the gift of the gab, or what you say.
Does he present the next song Does he present the next song live like he is like a DJ? He goes, all right, so this next song is a song by the band Bokassa. We're gonna play the next song off of our new record, All Out Dreams. This song is called "Let the Storm the Capital."
It goes a little something like this. In some ways, yeah, but I guess he's more a fan of like the no effects approach to talking between songs. Just joking around and trying to be funny, I guess, and he usually is. So yeah, seems to work.
Yeah, I think talking in between songs is one of those things is like a completely separate talent or a completely separate like ball game than just being able to play the songs and interact. I think that's another separate thing altogether. I've seen bands try to talk in between songs, and sometimes it's painful to listen to.
Yeah, I know, and it's we've been very fortunate in that regard, at least for being able to talk between songs without it becoming awkward.
Yeah, of course.
So,
Of course. And the final question I wanted to ask you is being a band from Norway, and I've interviewed so many bands from Norway that I don't really even ask what's the scene like in Norway, because everybody knows the history, but I've interviewed plenty of bands from Norway that aren't black metal or aren't death metal, you being one of them. And when I discovered a band like Refused from Sweden, who was always a standout between the In Flames and At the Gates, so I was just wondering how the scene has been for Bokassa in Norway in a way, because there's so many bands in Norway. I'd imagine that sometimes it's a little bit harder to stand out, or it's a little bit harder if there is such like an oversaturated sort of thing. But I think Bokassa stands out. Like, I never would have guessed that you guys were from Norway had it not been for the press release that I got from you guys,
Yeah. I mean, is it hard to stand out? I don't know. It is small, We're only 5.2 million people here or something. So, I mean, there's not that many bands that play our kind of music. So, I don't know. I mean, it is kind of separating the bands that tour and play a lot of gigs and those who don't, I suppose. So once you get around the circuit a couple of times and have been together a couple of years, I mean, you're going to stand out in some way, I guess. But, I mean, being able to play abroad and stuff, I mean, that's kind of difficult, I think. I mean, we were we played like 2 shows abroad before we got the Metallica gig, I think.
Wow.
And that just fell into our laps. We didn't have an agent or booking agent or anything at that point. So it's just like fortune kind of handed us that thing. And then after that, we were able to do our own tours and stuff. But we never like went abroad at all, really.
5.2 million people, and I would say that 5.1 of them are in bands. So
Yeah, so it's a small scene. At least like the rock and metal scene is kind of small, and pretty much everybody knows everybody in some way, at least. But it's that kind of thing. Once I mean, this is our 10th year as a band, so it's like we've been around a couple of times and met guys from that band in that city, and it's not that many cities either that are like big enough for it being a point of going there, to play a gig.
I have not met one Scandinavian, Norway, Finland, Sweden, or Denmark that was only in one band their entire life. I've never met that.
I don't know.
And drummers, for that matter, as well. So
yeah, drummers are usually short supply. So
yep.
Yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and most of all, thank you for a fantastic album to start 2024 off with. Is there just anything else with Bokassa that you'd like to promote with the release of All Out Dreams in terms of upcoming tours, or what else we could be expecting in the near future?
I guess just follow us on socials, and we'll tell you if we're coming to your city or not. And just look out. We're releasing some like behind the scenes studio videos, which I at least love watching those studio videos as well.
Yeah.
So and they're kind of edited funnily by our old bassist as well. So they're kind of funny. They showcase our kind of personalities, I think.
It's almost like your own Pantera home videos.
Yeah, I mean those are legendary. So it's they're not as long, unfortunately, but they're kind of funny and play up our kind of self-deprecating style of humor. So I guess just follow us on socials and come see us live if we're playing somewhere near you.
Please
and
come.
Thank you so much for being a guest on here.
Yeah, of course. Please come to New York. We'd love to have you here.
Yeah, I would love to come as well. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We are here with Bokassa, All Out of Dreams. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Bye.